All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining today and joining so promptly. My name is Hannah Lynette. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Manager at the Open Apparel Registry. And this is our webinar for brands going over how to contribute to and make the most of the OAR. And I am joined today by two of my colleagues, Katie Shaw, our Chief Program Officer, who you will hear from later in the presentation, and Vanessa Watson, who is our data moderator and team administrator, and she will be interacting with you in the chat and Q&A. A couple of pieces just to go over before we get started. As you may see, we are recording this presentation and we will be sharing that recording with you and everyone who's registered for the webinar after the webinar is complete, along with the presentation deck and any of the links that we mention and share in the chat. So you have access to all of that information following the webinar. And we do encourage you to use the Q&A or chat function to ask questions throughout the webinar. We will try to leave as much time as we can at the end to answer your questions live. So please do ask them via those two Zoom functions as your questions come up, and we will do our best to get you answers. In terms of what we are covering today, we're going to talk about what the OAR is and why brands are using it. We'll do a live demo of how to contribute data to the tool and to use the tool more broadly. We'll talk about what's next for the Open Apparel Registry. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A with whatever remaining time we have. So I'd like to start by playing this short intro video for you to give you an overview of the Open Apparel Registry. Great. And bear with me for one moment while I get us back into the presentation itself. Okay, so as we saw in that video, and as you may know, the Open Apparel Registry is a free open data tool, and we are looking to map all of the world's apparel facilities and assign a unique ID number to each. That's our larger mandate as an organization. So far, we're at over 77,000 of the world's apparel facilities mapped in our open database. And that data has come from over 600 organizations from around the world and across the apparel sector. Underneath that larger mandate of mapping the world's apparel facilities, there are three specific challenges that we are looking to face with the Open Apparel Registry. So the first is that we know that apparel facility data lives in all of these different places. Brands have their supplier lists, civil society organizations have data on the facilities where they're running programs, service providers have data, multi-stakeholder initiatives have data, certification schemas, facilities themselves, everyone has data sets, and they're living in different places, in different formats, and often in difficult to access formats or places. The second challenge that we're looking to face is that within all of these different data sets, we know that one facility might appear with many different variations in its name and address. So as an example of that, let's say that I work with a facility called Shirts Limited, and I spell out the word limited in my database. And another person works with them, but they have it as LTD, and another person has LTD period. If we were ever to try to line up our databases, it would be very difficult to know, are we talking about the same facility? And then you extend that to all of the different kinds of variations that can occur across a facility name and then the address as well. And it's quite difficult to put data sets together to understand bigger pictures of apparel facility data. And then the last piece is, so we have all of these disparate data sets that have all these variations in name and address data. So if we're trying to understand who potential partners might be at the facility level or look at system-wide trends, it's incredibly difficult to put all of that data together to get the information that we might want. And so the Open Apparel Registry is trying to solve those three challenges. The first way that we're doing that is creating one common open registry of facility names and addresses and assigning an industry standard facility ID to each of those facilities. And as we're doing that, our database is run on an algorithm and statistical model that is trained to catch all of those variations in names and addresses, so that as we're building this open database, we're also cleaning up the industry's facility data. So in that example of Shirts Limited, Shirts LTD period, our algorithm would realize that those are all actually the same facility and match them together and assign them one OAR ID, so that if we're trying to talk to each other about that facility, we have an ID that we can trust and know that we're talking about the same place. And then the last piece is that because we are an open data platform, when you look at a facility profile in the Open Apparel Registry, you can now see all of the different organizations that have contributed data about that facility. And so if you're trying to run some kind of program at the facility level, you now know who your potential collaborators might be. In terms of how the Open Apparel Registry works and how data flows through it, we'll do a live demo shortly and show you all of this sort of in the tool itself, but wanted to start with a broad overview of how data goes into and moves through the tool. So the first piece is looking at data sources. Where does the data come from? So we have contributors from across the sector, all of those different owners of data that I was just mentioning in the previous slide. So we have brands, civil society organizations, multi-stakeholder initiatives, service providers, researchers, certification schemas, factories and facilities. They can all upload data about facility name and address data to the Open Apparel Registry, and they do so via CSV or Excel file. I want to especially point out that facility owners and senior managers are able to upload data about their facility, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. And we also, you may have come across contributions in the Open Apparel Registry that have public lists listed next to the name of the contribution. And what that means is that the OAR team has found and accessed a publicly available supplier list and added it to the Open Apparel Registry. When we do that, we do reach out to the owner of that data and let them know that we have uploaded it to the registry and that they're welcome to take over management of it. So I say that because if you are someone on the call who you've seen your organization's data on the Open Apparel Registry with public lists next to it, and you're interested in directly contributing data yourself, please do reach out to our team. We're happy to transfer management of your organization's data over to you. So that's another thing you might see in the platform. The last piece that I'll quickly mention, which will come up later in the presentation, is that we do offer the ability to connect your database with our database via API. And so there are some contributions coming into the tool via an API connection as well. So that's where the data comes from. So it's either uploaded via CSV or Excel file or via our API. And in terms of what is uploaded, right now we only accept facility name and address data. So there are 3 columns in that CSV that you upload: country, name, and address for each of your facilities. It's very simple. As we will talk about later in this presentation, we are soon going to be releasing the ability to contribute and search by number of workers, type of product, parent company, processing type, and facility type. And we will give you more information about how that will work. Once that data is uploaded, that's when it hits that algorithm and statistical model. So essentially what's happening is that our tool is looking at each of the facilities in the list that you've uploaded and comparing them with all of the facilities that are currently in the Open Apparel Registry. If it finds a match, it goes ahead and matches those facilities together. If it does not find a match, it creates a new facility profile. If it thinks it found a match and it isn't sure, it's going to allow you to confirm or reject a potential match. And we'll show you in a little bit what that looks like. And then once it's gone through that processing piece, it's published on the Open Apparel Registry for anyone to search through and or download. And we'll show you what a facility profile looks like shortly. This is a snapshot of some of the users and contributors to the Open Apparel Registry. As I mentioned, we have over 600 organizations who've contributed data. So this is just a snapshot, but to give you a taste of the range of organizations who are interacting with our tool day to day. And the last piece to mention in sort of a general overview of the OAR is our position in the sector. So we do consider ourselves a neutral player in the apparel sector because we do work with all of these different stakeholder types that I have mentioned in this presentation. And so we've structured our organization to support that neutral positioning. So we are a nonprofit organization based in the United States. We have a multi-stakeholder board with representation from all of those different stakeholder groups that I've mentioned. And we even structure our tool itself and our code to be open and transparent to reflect the values of our organization. And in terms of our business model, because we are a nonprofit, we are able to accept philanthropic funding. So that does help anchor our neutrality. And then in terms of being able to search and contribute to the Open Apparel Registry, that is completely free for anyone to do, but we do offer 2 premium features in addition to that free functionality, and those will come up today. The first is the ability to connect your database with ours via the API, which we'll talk about. And the second is our embedded map feature, where you can pull an interactive map of your suppliers onto your brand website. So those are the 2 features that you could consider paying for, but everything else about the Open Apparel Registry is completely free for you and other users to use. So with that, I am going to talk about some of the benefits that we have heard from brands who are using the Open Apparel Registry to help you understand how you might be able to make use of the tool. So the first is saving time and money. So when we talk about that algorithm, you are able to essentially clean your facility name and address data against our algorithm and get those OAR IDs for each of your facilities, which you can then incorporate into your internal systems or external communications with stakeholders to make it very easy to know which facility you're talking about when you're interacting with different people. And I want to take a moment to look at the OAR ID and talk a little bit more about it. So as I've mentioned, each facility in the OAR is allocated a unique ID number, this OAR ID. It is not our intention to replace any existing ID schemas. Instead, what we're looking to do is have this ID serve as a central source of truth alongside that quality name and address data that we are collecting and creating in our database. And so an example of a brand taking advantage of this is Clark's, and they have sort of adopted the OAR ID internally in their systems to save time and money and build efficiency, as well as in their external communications like this supplier list to ensure consistency and efficiency across all of their platforms. The second benefit that we hear from brands is that collaboration piece that I mentioned. So being able to identify other organizations who are connected with current and prospect factories, and then identify new opportunities for collaboration with them. And an example that we've heard from Kings of Indigo is they use the OAR to understand whether there are brands sourcing from the same factories that they are, and or the same region, and then identifying opportunities to work with those other brands. And we'll do a demo specifically about how to figure out who your potential collaborators might be if this is something that's of interest to you. And then the last benefit is being able to show your commitment to open supply chain data while satisfying requirements of many industry initiatives, or guidelines or requirements of many industry initiatives. And I wanted to take a moment to dive into a few of those initiatives who have shared tips and tricks with us for how you can use the OAR to fulfill their guidelines. So the first is the transparency pledge. And as you can see in this slide, the bullet points that are in white are the pieces of the minimum transparency pledge requirements that you can currently fulfill by disclosing data on the Open Apparel Registry. So that's name and address, and being able to publish that data in a searchable format, as well as, we'll show this in a minute, you can download the results of any search or any list into a spreadsheet from the Open Apparel Registry. And as we will discuss, we are shortly going to be releasing the ability to disclose parent company, type of product, and number of workers. Excuse me. So very soon, you will be able to fulfill all minimum transparency pledge requirements by disclosing your supplier data on the Open Apparel Registry. And so relatedly, the Fair Labor Association has adopted the Transparency Pledge for its factory list transparency requirements. So same thing that I just said with Transparency Pledge. As soon as we have the ability to submit those additional data points, you will also be able to fulfill FLA requirements by disclosing on the OAR. We do know that the FLA deadline for companies in 2022 is March 31st. As we will talk about in a little bit, we anticipate these new data points will be ready for use in mid-March. So there will be time between the launch of those new data points and this deadline. And then the last piece is, if you are participating in Fashion Revolution's Fashion Transparency Index, some tips that they shared is that brands can receive points for having your supplier list uploaded to the OAR, but in order to receive those points, you need to be an active contributor to the OAR, and you need to link to that contribution from your website, and we'll show you how to do that. You can also receive points for disclosing multiple tiers, and we'll show you how to do that as well. So just wanting to point out some of these ways that the OAR can help you sort of connect with and fulfill these larger industry initiative requirements and guidelines. And so now I am going to switch to the live demo of the Open Apparel Registry so we can dig into everything that we have been talking about so far. So the first thing to show about the OAR is that you have the ability to translate the tool into a number of different languages. And I'll show you sort of briefly what that looks like. This is using Google Translate, so we know it's not perfect, but you can at least get closer to your native language if it is not English. I am going to continue this presentation today in English. And so I want to start this demo by just looking at one facility profile so you can get a general idea of what the information is that we display in the Open Apparel Registry. So I know the name of this facility and I can just search it in the Open Apparel Registry, and this is the facility that I want. So I'm going to click on it. And what I can see here is the name and address of this facility, a Google Earth view, that OAR ID that we were talking about, the GPS coordinates generated by this address. You can now see all of the different variations in name addresses that have to this facility. And then these are all of the different contributors who've contributed data about this facility. So that's generally what you can expect to see on a facility profile. We're going to talk about different ways to search the OAR in just a moment. I just wanted to show you that one profile so you can get a sense of what's going into the database and what it looks like once it gets there. So now let's talk about how to contribute data to the Open Apparel Registry. So the first thing that you're going to do, should you decide to contribute to the OAR, is you're going to want to create an account. And so that's completely free to do. You'll just go to this register contribute button here. It's very straightforward to sign up. The only piece that I wanted to mention live is if you have multiple people within your organization who are going to need access to your organization's data on the OAR to update it or manage from the administrative side, only one login can be used to manage your organization's data. So you will need to decide which login you want your team to use. So if you want it to be csr@nike.com, for example, or something, so you have a shared email address, that works well for a lot of our users, but you cannot have multiple logins managing one company's data. It all has to happen through one OAR contributor account. So that's the first piece I wanted to share. You'll fill out this form and you will have your OAR account. So now you can see in this view, I'm logged into an OAR account, and let's say that I am ready to contribute my data. So now I'm going to click this contribute button. And the first thing I want to show, the most important thing, is that we have these step-by-step instructions, which we can also drop into the chat for you. These are going to walk you through exactly what you need to do to prepare your data to be uploaded to the OAR, and then the steps that you'll need to go through as you are moving through the upload process. So if you ever have questions, everything we're going to go through today is in this guide. So please don't hesitate to click on that and follow it as you are working. So you will want to prepare your data in a CSV or Excel file. As I mentioned, right now, it's just 3 columns: country, name, and address. And we will be adding those additional data points, but what will remain is that those 3, country, name, and address, will be the ones that are required, and you can add the additional data points as you wish. So you still really want to be sure that those 3 data points are solid: country, name, and address, even if you're adding those additional data points as well. So you'll prepare your CSV or Excel file for upload. And then there's a decision to make, especially if you're considering uploading facilities that span multiple tiers of your supply chain. And so we offer the ability for you to, excuse me for one second, for you to upload multiple lists to your contributor account at once. So we can see here with OVS, for instance, they have tier 1, 2, and 3 lists. We can see that with Another Tomorrow. We can see it with Levi Strauss. They have a factory list and a mill list. So I share this because if you are looking to contribute information about multiple tiers of your supply chain, you can decide, do I want all of those facilities in one list? And then I can just describe that list as having facilities from tier 1, tier 2, et cetera. Or do I want a separate list for each of my tiers? Or if you want to break out your data in another way, you're welcome to do that. So you'll want to prepare your data accordingly, whether you're creating one list or whether you want to create sort of multiple lists by tiers. If you're creating one list, but it spans multiple tiers, you'll want to use this facility list name and description to say that this contains facilities from both tier 1 and 2, or however you want to describe the data that you're including in that list. And if you've decided to divide your data into multiple lists, one for each tier, then you'll want to upload, so let's say start with tier 1. You can name the list tier 1 or whatever you want to call it. You can add more information in the description and then upload it. And then you'll repeat that process for your tier 2 list and then your tier 3 list, et cetera, however many you might be doing. And that's how you get multiple lists into your account at once. I do want to be sure to talk about this feature. So select a list to replace. So let's say that I contributed my supplier data last year in 2021, and now I'm coming back to update my data. And I only want my current suppliers to be the ones that I am affiliated with on the Open Apparel Registry. I only want my current supplier list to be the one that shows up. When I upload my new list, I can select my 2021 list and replace it. So what that means when I replace my 2021 list is it makes that old list inactive. And what that does is if there are any facilities that I used to be affiliated with that I'm no longer affiliated with, my organization's name will no longer show up as one of the contributors on that facility profile. It will change to say a brand or retailer, since I am no longer actively affiliated with that facility. So should you be interested in only having your most current list available, please do make use of this replace list functionality. And I believe if we haven't already, we will drop these step-by-step instructions into the chat for you to follow. Okay. So you've uploaded your supplier list. Depending on how big the list is, it may take a few minutes for it to process. You will get an email alert once your list has finished processing. And then I'm just going to warn you, I'm going to the test environment for the Open Apparel Registry right now to show you a fake list that I've uploaded. So none of the data that you're going to see in this tab is real, but just to show you what it will look like when you are looking at your newly uploaded list to the OAR. So I'm logged in, I'll click on my account here and go to my lists. And this is where I can see the most recent list that I've uploaded. And I can see that this list has 2 error messages and 39 potential matches that I need to address. So that lets me know I need to click into this list and look at a couple of things. So the first is I need to resolve my errors. So I can use this filtering tool to pull up all of the facilities that generated errors. And I can see these here. If I click on one of them, I can see why it generated an error. So in this case, it had a really long address and our algorithm wasn't able to process it. So to fix that, I would go back to my full Excel or CSV file that I've prepared, make the edit I need to make to resolve the error, and then upload that full list again. So depending on how many errors I have, I may need to fix a couple of my facilities and then upload that full list again so that the list can be error-free. If a facility is returning an error, it means it's not going to show up in the Open Apparel Registry. So you will want to resolve all of your errors to ensure that your full facility list is displaying. Once I'm error-free, as we can call it, the next thing I want to do is complete the confirm reject process. So that's that piece that I mentioned where the algorithm thinks it might have found a match, but it's not totally sure. And so I can filter for all of my potential matches and essentially just go through and look at them and say, yes, this is a match, confirm, or no, this does not appear to be the same facility, and reject. And so I can just go through that for all of the different items that have generated this potential match state. And once I've fixed all of my errors and gone through confirm reject, my list is ready and uploaded on the Open Apparel Registry. So that's how to contribute your data via CSV or Excel file. And I imagine that's what most on this call will be doing. I will mention our API, which I brought up earlier. And I won't spend too much time on this now, but only to say, if you are interested in having an automatic connection between your database and the Open Apparel Registry, so you have as much up-to-date data in one or both places as possible, we do offer this functionality. We can drop a link to this page in the chat. And if you are interested in learning more, we're happy to set up a call with you and sort of talk through this feature. This is one of those premium features that I had mentioned at the beginning. So that is available to you as well. Okay. So we've talked through how to contribute your data to the tool. And we always like to be sure to emphasize that that is not where you have to stop. There's so much more that you can do to take advantage of the Open Apparel Registry and the functionality we have to make the most of having your data in the tool. And the first is that piece about finding potential collaborators either at the facility level or potentially at a regional level. So I'm going to show you a few ways that you might do that in the OAR. So the first is, I'm going to pretend for this part of the demo that I work at H&M. So let's say that I am H&M and I've uploaded my data. I want to look at my own facility list. So I've looked for my list, and then I can download it into a CSV or Excel file. And that file is not only going to include my name and address data and OAR ID, it's going to have all of the contributors who contributed data about each of my facilities. And so once I have it in that CSV or Excel file, then I have the ability to do some searching and formulas to help me figure out, oh, these are the brands that I tend to have the most overlap with. These are the people I might want to set up partnerships with, or this brand, we've never met with them, but they're showing up on some of our facilities, and it might be time to start to talk about collaborations with them. So that's the first piece, is you can download and examine your own list in addition to the lists of other organizations. You can also always, as I did at the beginning, if you know the name of a facility and you know, I'm trying to run a program at this facility, you can look up that specific facility and get information about that particular location. Then we can dive into a couple other types of searches and combination searches. So again, let's say that I am at H&M and I am interested in running some kind of collaboration with CNA. So the first thing I'm interested in is sort of how big of an impact could we have? How many factories do we have between the two of us? So I can see, oh, we have 22,476 facilities between our two lists. That's interesting. But now I'm actually interested in what's the number of facilities that we both source from. So I'm going to check this box, show only shared facilities. And now I can see, oh, 43 facilities. That's how many we have overlapping. And then let's say I'm actually interested in programs in India. So I'm going to filter even more. And now I'm down to 2 facilities. So I can go into a meeting and say, these are the 2 facilities where I think we should be focusing our collaboration efforts. Another way you might be interested in searching is, once again, let's say H&M interested in running programs in India, but I am specifically interested in Tamil Nadu. So this will be a very crude drawing, but let's say that I am drawing Tamil Nadu on this map. You can zoom in more as well to get a more accurate picture. But let's say that we're drawing that state. Everything, all of the factories within the area that I drew are now going to show up in the results of this search. So similar to searching or to downloading my full contributor list, now I might be interested in downloading just these Tamil Nadu factories so that I can see who the potential contributors and collaborators might be just within this specific region. So that might be another type of search that you might want to do. We will drop a guide for how to search the OAR into the chat as well, if you're interested in digging into more of the search functionality, but those are a few of the highlights for how we hear brands are most making use of that functionality. The next piece I want to talk about is a feature called Claim a Facility. So if we look at this facility that I've pulled up here, we can see that the sort of shield here is filled in with a green check mark. And if we scroll down this profile, we can see that there's this extra section of claimed facility information with all of this rich data about this facility. And what has happened here is, I'm just going to go to a random profile, is, let's say in this case, I am the owner or senior manager of this facility. I can claim this facility by clicking this link. I'll go through a short verification process. Essentially, our team is checking to see that the person is who they say they are and they're affiliated with the facility they say they're affiliated with. And then they can add all of these different data points to their profile on the Open Apparel Registry. So if you are interested in having your suppliers claim their profiles and sort of build out these really rich facility profiles, we have some sample language that you can use to reach out to your suppliers, let them know, hey, I've contributed to the Open Apparel Registry. Your facility is now listed. We'd love for you to claim your profile and fill it out. So we will drop that link into the chat as well for you if that's something you're interested in taking advantage of. And then the last piece, sort of the last category in making the most of the OAR is being able to show your commitment to open data and potentially linking to your contribution or showing your supplier list on your website. And so there are a couple of ways that you might want to do that we'll talk through now. So the first is, and I know this came up when we were talking about the Fashion Transparency Index, is if you need to get a link to your contribution to link to on your website. So again, if I'm H&M, when I select my contribution or my contributor account, you can see that the URL changes to include my contributor number. So this is the link that I can grab and link to on my website to link directly to my contribution in the Open Apparel Registry. So if you're looking to link to the OAR on your website, this is the process you'll want to go to grab the link to your contribution. We also we have a set of graphics that you can use to make it really easy to show that you are contributing to the OAR, and we can drop a link to those graphics in the chat as well. You can see an example here on Varner's site under transparency and traceability. They have this section linking to their contribution on the Open Apparel Registry. So this can be an example or inspiration for you if you're thinking about setting up something like that. One piece I want to mention, especially as it relates to the transparency pledge and FLA requirements, is every list in the Open Apparel Registry and every search in the Open Apparel Registry can be downloaded into a CSV or Excel file, as we see here. So with those transparency pledge requirements about either having your data in a searchable format or in a machine readable file, you can fulfill both of those by linking to your Open Apparel Registry contribution, because users will be able to download that data into a CSV or Excel file from the Open Apparel Registry. So that's kind of linking to your contribution on your website. The other feature that you might be interested in this is one called the embedded map that we offer. So this is one of those premium features that I was talking about that we offer in our tool. I will start by showing you a few live embedded maps so you can get a sense of what they'll look like. And then we can talk about the decisions to make to set them up and what it looks like to set them up. But essentially, if you choose to use an embedded map, you can pull just your organization's supplier data into a mini Open Apparel Registry on your website. So we can see this example with Kathmandu. We can see they're using a black and white color scheme. They only have 190 facilities instead of the 77,000 that are in the full tool. And if we click through, we can see that they've chosen to list additional data points on their facility profiles. Moving through, we can see Levi's is also using a map. They have this sort of bright green treatment on their facilities. And Ted Baker, as another example, is using this sort of greenish gray color to match their brand. And you can see that when you look at a facility profile on an embedded map, you are not seeing all of those other contributors because this map is just about your organization. But users can click through to see that facility profile on the full Open Apparel Registry with all of the different contributors who would show up there. So that's kind of what you can expect from an embedded map, a mini Open Apparel Registry with just your data on the OAR. And I want to show you the different packages that we offer so you can understand the choices that you might make if you're considering an embedded map. And we will drop this link in the chat and share it with you so that you can look at this yourself. This is available on our website. But there are essentially 3 decisions that help you decide which package you might want. The first is that you can add as many data points as you like to your embedded map. They will not necessarily show up on the full Open Apparel Registry. In these cases, you can see that the additional data points here will, in March when we launch this functionality, line up with the additional data points that will appear in the full Open Apparel Registry as well. So this will get users of these packages in alignment with that full functionality. But at our deluxe level, if you're interested in adding social and environmental improvement programs, environmental data points, percent migrant workers, percent female workers, any data points that you might be tracking that we don't currently have in the Open Apparel Registry, but you want displayed on your website, you can add to your embedded map. You can also see that there are different levels of styling that you can choose from to match your brand. And also that the number of facilities that you are uploading affects which package you might fall into. Again, if this is something you're interested in, we will drop the link in the chat and we're happy to talk to you about what might be the best fit for what you're looking for. But I always like to show with the embedded map what it is like to set it up because it is incredibly easy. So you'll go into your settings, and once you sign up for a map, you get this embed tab. And essentially what happens is any of those additional data points that you've chosen to add to your map, you can customize here. You can then change the color that you want on your map. Let's go for, it's almost Valentine's Day. We can do a pinky purple, and let's choose this font. And then let's say I want to play with the size as well. As I'm making these changes, this preview down here is adjusting so I can see exactly what I'm building in my map. And once I'm happy with how it looks, I copy this code and can share it with my IT team or whoever manages the website, and they just paste it onto the back end of your site. So there's no custom building, there's no RFPs about building a specific tool. It's as simple as that. If you are contributing to the OAR, that's all you have to do to configure the map for your website. So that is available for you as well. And we will drop the link about that in the chat so that you can sign up if you are interested. And the last piece that I want to mention about the embedded map before I hand this over to Katie is that similar to the full Open Apparel Registry, from an embedded map, you do have the ability to download data to a CSV or Excel file. So continuing that theme of being able to fulfill transparency pledge and FLA requirements, you can do that from your embedded map as well as by a link to the full Open Apparel Registry. And everything that I've gone over so far is available on our website in this quick start guide that we have created for brands, which we will also drop into the chat for you. So if there's anything that we went over too quickly or that you want to spend a little more time thinking about, we do have this guide available for you so that you can navigate the tool. And with that, I am going to hand this over to Katie Shaw, our Chief Program Officer, who is going to talk about what is next for the Open Apparel Registry.
Great. Thank you so much, Hannah, for that really thorough overview, which I hope was really helpful to everyone. And Vanessa has been diligently dropping links into the chat throughout. So please do click through those and we will follow up with all of this information after the session. But for now, I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour through 2 major updates from us in terms of what is coming next for the Open Apparel Registry. Lots of interest in this first point in the chat, and that is that next month, users will be able to contribute and search by additional data points in the Open Apparel Registry. And just to give a little bit of context, we very deliberately, when we built and launched the Open Apparel Registry in March 2019, we had a razor-like focus on name and address data for a very deliberate reason. And we wanted to elevate that baseline quality of data to enable greater efficiency and collaboration across supply chains. And we heard from very early adopters of the tool that there was interest in adding additional data points. But what we've seen change over the 3 years since the tool has been live is that actually these data points are now being gathered and shared through brand websites and other portals at scale now. And there's also the comfort and the desire for organizations to be sharing these data points, coupled with the requirements of organizations like Transparency Pledge and the FLA, which Hannah has touched on a few times already in this presentation. So we ran some consultations last summer and spoke with a wide range of stakeholders about what the additional data points would be that we would accept and display on Open Apparel Registry. And we have landed on these 5 data points. So the first 3 that you see listed on the screen now, number of workers, parent company, and type of product, with the missing 3, if you will, from Transparency Pledge requirements. And then type of facility and type of processing were, through our consultations and ongoing conversations with stakeholders, the 2 data points that organizations really wanted to be able to see. They want to be able to download those data points and work with that data. So those will be the first 5 additional data points that we'll be displaying. And so on the next few slides, I won't dwell on these slides for ages, but I'll draw out a few key points about each of the data points. And as I say, we will be following up with this presentation deck afterwards, so you can look at this as at your leisure. What we have done with number of workers is we have proposed some taxonomy, and that aligns with the Transparency Pledge. So for those of you that are gathering this number of workers data point, we have very deliberately worked to accept the ranges that are mandated by Transparency Pledge, so that you're not having to reformat and manipulate your data further. And the additional point that I want to make around number of workers is that in downloading the data, users will be able to access both the raw data, so whatever the data was that was uploaded to the registry, as well as the data when it's been processed by our algorithm. The next point that users will be able to add is parent company. And so again, just emphasizing here that all of the raw and processed data will be made available through those CSV and Excel downloads that Hannah has shown you are possible for all searches in the Open Apparel Registry. Moving into type of product, which is the final transparency data point requirement, we do want to note that we haven't created a taxonomy here. So for type of product, we will accept any data contributions. There are particular ways that you'll need to format that data, but we will accept any descriptors that you are working with in your database for type of product. And again, all of that data will be available, both raw and processed, via the CSV and Excel download. Then moving swiftly on to the 2 data points beyond the Transparency Pledge data points. So type of processing and type of facility. I want to make 2 points about both of these data points. And the first is that in our consultations over the course of several months last year, it became clear to us that there was no industry-wide taxonomy for type of processing and type of facility. So we as an organization, and kudos to Natalie Grillan, our colleague, for doing really great work on this, we have developed a taxonomy to help move the industry towards standardized disclosure of these data points. And in doing this work, we reference taxonomies from organizations such as Textile Exchange and GOTS, because we know many of you will be working to the parameters of those taxonomies. So we've tried to sort of reach a taxonomy that will enable industry consensus. And again, in follow-up to this presentation, we'll be able to share the full taxonomy. But on the next, on the slide that Hannah's got on screen now, this gives you a sense of the work that went into creating this taxonomy. So it's a sneak peek behind the scenes. You'll notice that we've deliberately got this offset on the slide so that you can appreciate that there is sort of a lot more detail behind this, but for the purposes of this presentation, we just wanted to give you a bit of a sense of how in this instance facility type is being broken out across different categories. And so Hannah, whilst I talk you through a few other points, can show you on our test site. This is live and in development at the moment. It's the biggest development since we launched the Open Apparel Registry. And this is a little sneak preview behind the scenes of what our new facility profiles will look like. So as Hannah scrolls down, you can see that we've done some work so that it's not quite such unwieldy long lists on facility profiles, and you'll be able to expand out the different data points. You can see here who the contributors are, parent company, number of workers, and those additional data points that we are working to make available on Open Apparel Registry. And in this second example, again, you can see that this is where we've populated with greater amounts of test data. And so when you use these expand and collapse functions in the profiles, you're seeing higher numbers of data points for each of those categories. So really exciting development, and something that is going to enable many users to meet the requirements of the different standards that you're reporting into. And again, Vanessa is dropping links into the chat to sections of our website where you can get more information. So we've had some of these questions come through on the chat already. What's the timeline that we're working to? These new data points are going to be launching in the tool in mid-March. And so keep an eye on our newsletters. Please do sign up if you're not already subscribing to those, because we will be sharing updates in the build up to the launch of, when those data points are made available. But if you would like early access, we do encourage you to get in touch with us so that you can upload additional data points in advance of the full feature going live on production. And if it's of interest, we will be making a trade press announcement about the launch of this feature. And if you so wish, you can be included in that communication. So we'll share the email address at the end of this presentation that you can reach out to if you're interested in that early access. The last point that I will make in relation to the launch of these additional data points on Open Apparel Registry is that we will be updating all of the information about how to contribute data to the Open Apparel Registry, because there are some changes to the way that many existing users will be used to contributing data to accommodate for the increased data points and the additional processing that our algorithm is going to need to do. One point that I do want to emphasize is that these additional data points are optional. So if you as a brand are not yet if you're not yet gathering these data points, that does not prevent you from sharing your supply chain data with the Open Apparel Registry. The bare minimum remains the same, that all we need to accept a data contribution and create facilities on Open Apparel Registry at a minimum is name and address data. However, if you have committed to the transparency pledge requirements, you will now be able to fulfill those requirements entirely through Open Apparel Registry, should you so choose to do it that way. So that's everything on additional data points. We can take more questions at the end. This is going to be a whistle-stop introduction to Beyond Apparel and the other big piece of work that we are doing at the moment. So since the very first day that we launched Open Apparel Registry, we have had interest from other sectors and multi-category retailers in expanding our approach beyond apparel. So organizations coming to us saying that they love the work that we're doing with open data and to solve this facility identification problem, and that they would love to see it in other sectors. And so we have reached a moment in time where we're going to be expanding our approach for something that we have the working title, the Open Goods Registry. And the reason for this is that the challenges that we've seen in apparel supply chains around complexity, around that opacity that you will all be very familiar with, are not unique to apparel. And the issues that we see in supply chains, they can't be addressed if facility identities remain unknown. And so in these 4 columns here, we can see the kind of really meaty problems that are prevalent across all supply chains, regardless of the particular sector. So you hear this from us a lot. Data is not standardized, and that's inclusive of, both within or across retail industries. And apparel has come a long way in the time that Open Apparel Registry has been in existence. But in other sectors, we can see that that data is still not open or easily accessible to all parties and stakeholders. And again, because there is no Open Apparel Registry for other sectors, there's no one universal ID for facilities that is free and open for all. And so that data being siloed in different data sets in non-machine readable formats, it prevents that comprehensive supply chain mapping that we believe we really need to see. And if we think about the huge challenges that we're all facing globally, like climate change, like human trafficking, we really need collaboration. And our perspective is that the key to that collaboration is high quality, open access supply chain data. And so we are in the discovery phase of building, as I say, this working title, the name will change, of the Open Goods Registry, and it's brought to you by the team behind the Open Apparel Registry. And what it will be is an accessible, neutral, and collaborative supply chain mapping tool that many users familiar with Open Apparel Registry will have become accustomed to. And it will follow that same model where the data is populated and used by stakeholders from across multiple different sectors. And as I said, it will be brought to you by the team behind Open Apparel Registry. And we've got this experience of bringing an unprecedented level of openness and standardization to apparel facility data. And if we move on to the next slide, I just want to touch on why we believe now is the moment in time to do this work. So I've mentioned briefly that we've got the experience of building an open data platform, and this for us feels like the natural next step. So the technology on which the Open Apparel Registry has been built, it's sector agnostic and was designed for scale. We have a governance and stakeholder model that again was built for replication and scale. And through this governance and stakeholder model, we've built trust within one sector, and we hope that we can build on that to roll out across other supply chains, because we really believe that our position as a neutral public good is unique and that it fosters collaboration. And in terms of the timescale that we're working to, as I said, discovery is underway for this Open Goods Registry. And this multi-phase approach is going to allow us to test, to learn, to build consensus and launch with collective action. So we are underway with discovery and engagement, and we are hoping to launch in Q4 of this year. And then beyond that, we will continue to build and grow and add additional data points from across different sectors over time. And so our call to action, if you will, if you are a multi-category retailer and you would like to learn more and get involved, there are a variety of different ways that you can do that, whether that's speaking with our product manager who's diving right into the consultations to think through the best design for this tool. If you're gathering supply chain data across different categories, we would love to understand if you would be interested in sharing that data with us, either for the beta phase or later on this year. And by participating, you'll have the opportunity, similar to what you experience with Open Apparel Registry, to clean your name and address data against a unique ID. You can show commitment to opening up supply chain data and being part of a bigger public launch of an Open Goods Registry. And you can help to shape this new industry tool and ensure that your organizational needs are taken into account in its design and functionality. So very conscious of time, and knowing that we've had some more questions pop into the chat whilst I've been speaking, we will pause there and give you all an opportunity to add further questions to the chat, and we'll pick up on some that we said that we would answer later in the presentation. So I'll start with Helen's question about whether production facilities get info about their OAR ID and the fact that they've been listed in the tool. Hannah touched on this earlier. There are all sorts of ways that brands can reach out to facilities in their supply chains, and Vanessa dropped the link into the chat with details of suggested text. So there is no automated process by which facilities are notified that they are listed in the Open Apparel Registry, but we strongly encourage brands to not stop their engagement with the Open Apparel Registry at the point of upload, but to let your suppliers know that they are listed in the Open Apparel Registry, that they can claim their profiles and add those additional data points that Hannah talked through on the claimed facility profiles. We also had a question from Karuna saying there are obvious reasons why brands benefit, but what's the advantage for a manufacturer to list themselves and to keep their details listed? I'll keep this brief, but in summary, it's an opportunity for facilities to be listed on an open data platform that is widely used across the sector. Through claiming profiles, there's the opportunity for facilities to add additional data about their facilities. So as well as what Hannah's touched on in terms of number of workers and product type, you can also include things like minimum order quantities, lead times. And so it's an opportunity to have a rich profile on a freely accessible resource that is available and used by many across the sector. I'll pause there and see, Hannah, if there's other questions that have popped into the chat since I've been talking that you wanted to answer. We've had a couple of questions relating to additional data points. Will additional data points include business license registration, or is this considered private information? With this first round of additional data points, we won't be including business license registration, but what I will say is that we're noting interest in additional data points that users are interested in seeing in the future. So we can add that list, that suggestion to the list for consideration in the future. And that, I think, answers the next question, which is, do we anticipate adding even more data points in the future? Yes, is the short answer to that. Hannah touched on some of the other data points that we know are being gathered and that users are interested in seeing. So percentage of female workers, percentage of migrant workers, capacity percentages. We very deliberately started with 5 additional data points to it's a kind of standard approach that we take to test new functionality and ensure that we don't try to do too much too soon and sort of run into unexpected bugs. But we do envisage adding to that set in the future. Could we please confirm if a factory is supposed to have just one OAR ID regardless of its contributor? Yes, that's correct. So a facility should have just one OAR ID. But it may well, as you saw on the profiles that Hannah shared, it will often have multiple different contributors because of the various different organisations that are connected to it. Moving on to the next question. These are coming through thick and fast, which is wonderful. For brands producing both soft and hard goods, does OAR include only apparel suppliers? Do you have a recommendation to meet the transparency pledge across categories? So that speaks to the final point that I made in terms of what's coming next. At the moment, we are limited to apparel suppliers, but we are expanding across multiple categories, and we're aware of transparency pledge requirements, but also groups like Ethical Trading Initiative, I know, have members from across multiple different categories. So in the future, when the working title Open Goods Registry is launched, we'll be accepting data contributions across categories. And that will include all of the additional data points that we're launching on Open Apparel Registry next month. Next question for Elizabeth Bennett. Is there a plan to merge with certifications databases so that certification status can be reliably updated? If not, why have unverified certification status been included? Rather than a merge of databases, what we can share is that certification schemes are contributing data themselves to Open Apparel Registry. So it may be that Hannah's about to share an example. I can see her moving around. For example, Architects contributes their data to the Open Apparel Registry, as does Fair Trade, and then also Fair Trade USA. So that's a really good source of certification status for facilities. With Fair Trade USA in particular, they've broken their contribution up into a couple of different lists. So you can see Fair Trade USA certified facilities as well as applicant facilities. So those facilities that have applied for Fair Trade USA status but have yet to be approved, but it's in process. And I can say that with that certification scheme in particular, they are refreshing that data as frequently as every month. So I hope that answers your question, Elizabeth. And then Karuna, as a follow-up to the question about facilities listing, while it does bring visibility, does it not also make the manufacturer vulnerable? My answer to that question, Karuna, would be that it's a very important part of our neutrality that we house non-controversial data points. So by that I mean we have this facility name and address data, but we're not gathering any data and sharing anything about, for example, audit histories or scores or reports of violations in facilities. So in that sense, it's non-controversial data only, and so we would hope does not make the facility vulnerable. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Hannah, being very mindful of the time that we're at. But thank you everyone for your great questions.
That was very impressive, Katie. The fastest Q&A I've ever seen. Thank you everybody so much for joining. We've appreciated your participation and questions. Thank you to my colleague Vanessa for all that she's done interacting with you all in the chat. As we mentioned, we'll be sending a recording of this presentation, the slides we've been going through, and all of those links that Vanessa has been so diligently sharing in the chat. And as Katie mentioned, upcoming important dates. If you want to be a part of launching the new data points in the OAR, you will get access on March 3rd. And we dropped a sign-up form in the chat that you can use to indicate your interest in being a part of that launch, or you can email us, as Katie said. And the full launch to everyone in the Open Apparel Registry of those additional data points will be mid-March. And we will let everyone know as soon as that is available. So thank you all so much for joining. We appreciate your time. Stay safe and stay healthy.